Welcome back. So now I want to briefly go through the religious year of Christianity and the major holidays. This these dates aren't for this year, but I liked the chart. So the religious year, probably more than any other religion that we study, Christianity is the most liturgical. It has more liturgy, more ritual throughout the year. So the calendar of Christianity is incredibly important, and it tells us in multiple ways the story of our faith and teaches us the story of the faith in a single year. So long before all Christians had copies of the Bible in their own personal possession, the church year would be marked by colors and various other symbols and signs within the church sanctuary to let you know where we were in the movement through this year. So these are two major systems that are used and the colors that go with them. So just a visualization. Would not ask you to know this, but just to get a sense of, the multi-layered way that we celebrate the Christian religious year. So like I said, it tells the story of Jesus and our faith. So the religious year begins for the Christian in Advent, which is 4 Sundays before Christmas Day. So the new year for the Christian begins whatever Sunday, 4 Sundays before December 25th. Advent then is a season, by the way, not a specific day. So there's a difference. We have rituals, particular days, but we also have seasons, which are multiple Sundays. So 4 Sundays before, meaning coming or arrival, and it's very much a time of joy and preparation for the coming of the baby, the coming of the one who will save us. Many churches nowadays will practice with Advent calendars. Hope, love, peace, and joy are the most famous ways that they have been, that Advent candle works for us in the church. And so each Sunday has a different topic, and you light the candle, and then on Christmas Day you light the Christ candle. So the season of Advent ends on Christmas Day. So we may think of December as Christmas season, but in the most technical sense, it is not Christmas, it is Advent. Christmas season doesn't begin till after December 25th. So December 25th then is the day that we celebrate Christ's birth. Now, some of you may be aware that we have no idea when Jesus was actually born. And so in the early church, there was no fixed date for the celebration of Christmas. But notice here the 4th century, so that would have been that, remember in 313 when Constantine makes Christianity legal, then Christianity begins, as it goes more public, is able to come out from under the shadows. There's an attempt to standardize the liturgy, among many other things. And so beginning the 4th century, we do see it coming to be celebrated more and more in December, and it very much does it replaces a festival, the birth of the sun, the solstice, as an attempt to give Christians an alternative to this very, very, very important pagan holiday. So somebody says, oh, well, Christmas just isn't a pagan holiday. Well, the answer is yes, it was celebrated on a pagan holiday. It is to give Christians a way to celebrate something that is important to Christianity, but it does not have pagan roots. So Christmas. But Christmas Day then begins the celebration of the Christmas season. So if you've heard of the 12 days of Christmas, that runs from Christmas Day on, that is the season of Christmas, which ends in Epiphany Sunday. So the 12 days, we've all sung the song, probably haven't spent much time, really thinking about it. But from December 25th to this date, January 6th, that's the Christmas season in the religious sense. So the Christmas season ends with the appearance. The word appearance, Epiphany means appearance, and it commemorates the coming of the wise men to see Jesus. So one of the really only events we have of Jesus' childhood. So the 12th night is understood as January 5th, and either on Epiphany Sunday or January 5th, these are the times when many other countries will celebrate the giving of gifts on Epiphany rather than Christmas Day. So if you go to places in Europe, South America, other Christian countries, you might find that December 25th is a solemn religious holiday and January 6th is the day when all the presents are given. But again, notice that we are telling the story in order. Probably not one that you are very familiar with, but I have just thrown it in there to highlight what I'm trying to get at is this idea of telling the story. Then the next 40 days after Christmas, February 2nd, is known as Candlemas, and it celebrates the presentation of Jesus in the temple. And so we go from him being an infant to his celebration. So this idea of the telling of the story. So you didn't even have to have a Bible. You could just go into church on Sunday, and if you for churches that focus more on the liturgy, know exactly where you are in the story. So there are other events, obviously, but the next big one, of course, is Ash Wednesday. Now, you might have noticed, we talked in Judaism about the whole idea of the lunar calendar, so that the celebrations in Judaism move around the calendar. They do not have fixed dates. So Christmas, for example, is a fixed holiday because it always happens on December 25th, no matter what. But because of the fact that so much of the Christian story is tied to the Jewish calendar, we also have what we call movable feasts or holidays, because fixed holidays where there's a specific date, a movable feast or holiday where it moves around. And so Lent, of course, is dependent on the date of Easter. So Easter is dependent on the day of the Passover. So whenever Passover is that year, then that determines when Easter is, and 40 days before that, we celebrate Ash Wednesday. So we are currently in the period of Lent right now, in these 40 days that are between, and it's, ashes. So on Ash Wednesday, you go in, often it's a very solemn communion service where you are marked with the ashes, and you go into a period of giving something up. But anyway, that's on the next slide. But oftentimes in many communities, there is a celebration the day before Ash Wednesday. So here's a religious holiday that spawns a secular holiday, Fat Tuesday or Mardi Gras, or just a sort of time when you just get it all out of you before you go into Lent. So Lent, then, these actual 40 days, it is a preparation for Easter. It is a preparation to accept the sacrifice of Jesus. And so often observed by giving up something. The most famous, obviously, are meat, chocolate, sugar, basically luxury items. But also adding something. So acts of charity, but often it's a time of special study or prayer. Which ends then, Lent ends with the Holy Week or the Passion Week. And we're coming up on Palm Sunday. This marks Jesus' entry. Palm Sunday is a day of celebration and joy at the coming of Jesus the Messiah, but the rest of the week is very solemn. So this is the idea. It's called Palm Sunday because of the story in the gospel story of how they greeted Jesus at the gates of Jerusalem, waving palm branches, and they proclaimed Jesus Messiah, the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Sorry. Okay. So Palm Sunday. Maundy Thursday then commemorates Jesus, the Passover supper, which is then we also refer to as the Last Supper, because it's the last meal he has with his disciples. Maundy then comes from the word meaning commandment. So it is a communion service that we understand as a commandment. So we do communion, depending on your church, every once in a while to every time you walk through the door. But this is the one that we commemorate that original day. So the crucifixion takes place on Good Friday, not meaning wonderful, but it's meaning holy. And then the 3 days in the tomb with the resurrection on Easter, which is the holiest day of the Christian calendar. So we start with Advent as we prepare for the birth of Jesus, and we move through the months until now we're in the springtime and Jesus' death and resurrection. But then the church calendar goes on to tell the rest of the story, in a sense. So as we move out of so now we're in the season of Easter, after Easter has taken place. So currently, we personally are in the season of Lent. Once we have celebrated Easter, we go into the season of Easter. 40 days after Easter, we commemorate Jesus' ascension into heaven. So that's called Ascension Sunday, and it is based on the writings of Luke, the Gospel of Luke and Acts. Then, of course, we get to Pentecost. So in the story, as it's told to us in Acts, before Jesus ascends to heaven, he commands his disciples to wait for him for the coming of the Spirit. And it happens during the Jewish feast of Pentecost, which is 50 days after the Jewish holiday of Passover, or as it's celebrated in the Christian tradition, the 7th Sunday after Easter. And so the third part of the Trinity, and in some ways, the birth of the church. And so, of course, we're telling the story, right? So after the coming of the Holy Spirit, the next Sunday is Trinity Sunday, the Sunday that we celebrate the threefold nature of God. So it is often, marked by the reciting the Nicene Creed, but I really found this to be fascinating. You go back in this image right here, if you go back into the most ancient artwork, you would never see this today. These three figures, this is an image of the Trinity, right? So you've got the three parts of God sitting at a table, eating in communion with each other. It's a really fascinating image. You would not see the Trinity so often depicted as three separate individuals right anymore. So as the best place to talk about this next slide, once Pentecost is over, we are no longer in a season. So we have multiple seasons of the calendar year. So Advent is one, Christmas, Lent, the Easter season. But this does not encompass the entire calendar year. There are times in between seasons, and we call that ordinary time. And it means ordinary not as in commonplace, but ordinary as in an ordinal number. So basically, we go into Trinity Sunday to the beginning of Advent, the first Sunday after Pentecost, the second Sunday after Pentecost, the third Sunday, etc., etc. So if you pay attention to the top of a bulletin, and more liturgically oriented churches will mark this. There is a second, smaller period of ordinary time, not celebrated by all traditions, but the one between Epiphany and Ash Wednesday. So ordinary time. So you're either in a season or you're in ordinary time. And, come back, roll. So then we come around to ordinary time through the summer. What would it be? Our summer in the Northern Hemisphere. And the next major holiday of the church is All Saints' Day. So All Saints' Day is November 1st, and it is here the remembrance of the saints, both known and unknown. So it was a tradition within the early church to this idea of saints' days. So the idea that the various saints of the church were given a day on the calendar in which you would celebrate them and their life. But there were a lot of martyrs whose names are lost to us. And as the calendar of the saints filled up, and then this knowledge that there were probably individuals who were equally saintly, but had been wiped from our historical knowledge, the church decided it needed a day to celebrate everybody. So in a sense, it's a catch-all day. The day that we celebrate everyone. Now, of course, on the day that we celebrate the most holy among us, that there's another holiday, Christian holiday, that spawns a secular one, All Hallows Eve. So this idea, the night, Hallows meaning holy, All Holy Day or All Saints Day, the night before, becomes sort of understood as the least holy, or when the least holy of the demons and the spirits are set free in some way. So that's the origin of Halloween as related to the idea of All Saints Day. I would say that depending on your tradition, November 2nd is All Souls Day, and that is many, particularly the Latin countries, the day November 2nd, All Souls Day, is when people remember their own personal family members who have passed on as well. And so one often goes to the graves of family members, brings flowers, cleans the cemeteries, etc. So, and then of course, we go back to Advent. So the whole story from the birth, death of Jesus, the Trinity, and then all of the followers of Jesus celebrated in a given year. So another just couple slides here then on not on specific liturgical holidays, but on the sacraments. So sacrament, there are different ways I have been using the term sacrament, which is a ritual that understood as a visible sign of God's grace. Not all churches, particularly certain Protestant churches, understand this idea of, and by the way, the two commanded by Jesus are baptism and communion. So some churches understand these as commandments, things that we do, but not necessarily mystical in the sense that they bring God's grace to us. So there's a variety of understanding about what those mean. The Roman Catholic Church has 7. The Protestant tradition has 2. I will not ask you to learn all 7 of the sacraments of the Roman Catholic Church. You definitely need to understand the 2 that are universal to everyone. So you notice then, here is the list, though. I do want to make a couple comments. The Roman Catholic tradition baptizes infants. So they have a sacrament that brings children. If you've baptized an infant, then as a young person, you are then confirmed in the faith, where you accept the salvation that was chosen for you by your parents. Communion, penance or confession. They used to call anointing the sick last rites, but now no. Ordination then for priests. So not all of these are ceremonies that every person in the church goes through. Matrimony is considered a sacrament in the Roman Catholic Church, which explains their very different understanding of divorce. If your marriage actually was a ritual that visibly brings God's grace, then you can't just break it apart. It's not just a without consequences. God is in it, and you can't just throw it away. Then, of course, baptism and communion. So the word baptism then means to wash, and I gave you a list of various ways that it's understood. But as a ritual or as a ceremony itself, it is what one does to become a member of the Christian faith. So here, though, however, this is another. The sacraments are often what divide us as a church. So when do you, why do we have different denominations? Well, some of these are the issues that define that. So that you do it at birth, as the Roman, most of the church baptizes infants. There are some exceptions, like the Baptists, that believe that one has to be old enough to understand what is being agreed to. Now, there's also division over sprinkling versus immersion. Roman Catholics, a lot of Protestants sprinkle. Believers' baptism and immersion are often connected. And immersion, the full enveloping of the body by the water, which is, of course, how we assume it was done by Jesus. So again, here are some of the ways that the church disagrees. Is it a necessary part of salvation or just a sign thereof? So again, these issues that divide the church. Sacraments, we've already talked about it, actually transferred into the body and blood of Jesus. Jesus is spiritually present with, or a memorial or a symbol. And then the church does give different names. The Lord's Supper, because it was an actual meal. Communion, because we commune together, we meet as the church. And Eucharist, then, is another term which comes from the idea of thanksgiving. And that's it. So I will see you all again soon for Islam.